With the first pick,
Thunderstruck! Thunderstruck! Yeah, Thunderstruck!
welcome into the Fantasy Rant podcast presented by Stadium Rant. I am Dan Baker, accompanied by Evan Gooding and Lee Cook. Today on the episode, we are going to be talking about Brock Bowers, breaking down the tape that we saw, doing some rookie evaluations. We got a segment we're going to be talking about free agents, players that are heading into free agency in this offseason that need that change of scenery. Somebody that's going to move locations and you think can have a bounce back year. And then we're going to, predict some things about the Super Bowl. Who's going to win? What prop bets do we like? Who's going to be the MVP? And maybe some impact on these players moving forward in Dynasty based on if they get the L or catch the dub for the Super Bowl this year. All right. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right into the Brock Bowers breakdown here. Love the alliteration with this. Georgia Bulldog Brock Bauer breakdown.
Brock Bowers.
All right. So just to go over some stats that I saw here, it is just it's impeccable what he's done in his time as a tight end for Georgia. This past season, out of 81 qualifying tight ends, and the qualifying mark was at least 30 targets. Not very high, but he was 6th in targets, 3rd in receptions, 3rd in yards. This is the regular season, by the way. I think I'm pulling the stats, and it's a little bit unfair when a couple guys got extra games because of the playoffs. So I want to make it as even as possible. All regular season rankings here. So, yeah, 6th in targets, 3rd in receptions, 3rd in yards, 5th in receiving touchdowns. Guy is super efficient. One of those sticky stats that we look for is yards per route run. The guy, when he's running the routes, he's getting the ball. He was 3rd in all of FBS players in yards per route run, 1st in yards after the catch. We're going to start touching on some of the positives here, but I'm sure that's something that we're all going to touch on. Forced the 2nd most missed tackles, had the 2nd most yards after catch per reception. So it's not just a volume-based stat, that yards after catch that he got 1st in. He is doing it every play. So those were some of the biggest things that I saw that stood out specifically in his senior year. Let's move on to the positives. Lee, what did you see when breaking down some of this tape for Brock Bowers? Some of the positives here.
Speed. I mean, that's the biggest thing that separates him from the other tight ends. He's so fast. The yards after the catch, it was 8.5 yards per reception after the catch, which is just a insane number for a tight end. That's more of a wide receiver number. The guy is just super athletic. He finds the open spots on the field, runs really crisp routes for the most part. Saw a couple that, maybe squared off a little bit more than he should have. But, he's the best tight end prospect we've had since Kyle Pitts, easily, head and shoulders above everyone else in the draft. And really, he's one of those guys, when you look at him, you probably can compare him more favorably to your Marvin Harrison Jr. and your Malik Neighbors than you can any of the other tight ends.
For sure.
Great hands, a better blocker than what you would expect for a guy his size. And that could be an issue. We'll talk about that with the weakness. Could be an issue at the next level. But the biggest thing I saw with him is just tenacious. He was very tenacious, a ton of effort blocking. What he did as a freshman, as a tight end in the SEC, was unheard of, and he continued that production throughout his career. He's a guy who is a slam dunk top 10 pick.
Absolutely. Really quick before we move on to Evan and your positives when you broke down the tape, you mentioned Kyle Pitts. If you guys had to go mano a mano, who are you taking as a prospect? Take out all of Kyle Pitts' NFL production, but purely as a prospect. Let's say they're both coming out this year. Who would you be drafting?
I think Brock. Bauer. I mean, Kyle Pitts is definitely a better route runner, but just more complete tight end at the position of what you need and what the demands. I think he's able to meet a lot and exceed a lot of those expectations pretty easily. Pretty
Yeah.
easy pick for me, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Lee?
Yeah, I would agree. I think just the production profile from college, if you remove the physical profile, is just way, way in Brock's favor. Pitts had a good last season, but not a very productive first 2 seasons. They both played 3 years in college, so that they're very comparable. But it's tough to ignore that production profile at a school, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, that is absolutely one of the top 3 schools, and they don't typically feature the tight end the way he was featured. And to me, that really shows you how much, how head and shoulders above he was really all of their other receiving options while he's been there.
100%. Yeah, and on a great SEC team too. Yeah, he was the first ever two-time winner of the John Mackey Award. Second team All-American in 2021, his freshman season. First team All-American in 2022, and unanimous All-American in 2023. Also led his team in receiving every year at Georgia, and obviously Georgia won 2 national championships. All huge things to mark down for the resume on Brock Bowers. Evan, what do you have to add for the positives here?
Yeah, I mean he's an absolute freak athlete, hyper competitive. I think he would have led the league this year, except he had some games where he missed because of injury. So there, we'll talk a little bit about that too. But he's a better route runner than most of the wide receivers coming in from this class. So I agree with what you're saying. From how he's comparable to Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors there. That completely makes sense to me. His ability to just change direction without losing any momentum, I think, is pretty incredible as well. And the surprising thing for me is he ran close to 50% of his routes from the slot, which for a tight end is pretty impressive. And we talked about it a little bit, but when he's got the ball in his hands, 8.5 yards after catch per reception over his career, 33 broken tackles in the last 2 seasons, 33 broken tackles. Like he led the FBS in that over the past 2 seasons. So crazy. I saw one play where I think he broke 5 tackles on one after one catch. It was just a quick screen out. So it's like, I don't understand how.
Oh yeah, and I just realized I didn't even answer my own question. I would also go Brock Bowers. I am more in favor of the complete tight end, the George Kittle type, over like the, let's say, Evan Ingram type. Some guy that has got the speed, he's athletic, but I'd rather have the guy that can do that plus block.
It was really hard to answer that without putting into consideration like how Kyle Pitts is done.
Yeah, you can't eliminate that. I mean, we're human. Yeah. I mean, as much as we try to forget it, we've all owned Kyle Pitts in one form or the other over the last few years.
Yeah, funny enough, I was in a tight end premium league where I was first in a 16-team league. I was so done with Kyle Pitts being the only reason why my games were close. I traded him straight up for Evan Ingram. I know this is probably not what most dynasty heads would do, looking at the long-term outlook. I have Brenton Strange. This was right as Evan Ingram got extended. So Evan Ingram's going to be there for the next 3 years. Brenton Strange will be there if he gets injured. Don't know if Brenton Strange is going to make the active roster, though. He's been sitting on the taxi squad there for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how that goes. Evan Ingram, career high in receptions. I don't think that's going anywhere, especially with Ridley being gone. However, Kyle Pitts, now that Arthur Smith is gone, he is out from under the thumb. I do. I'm starting to regret that trade just a tiny bit, as I did not win the championship in that league, and that's really all that play was for. But regardless, I do think that Kyle Pitts is just a little bit more of a, I don't want to call it a one-trick pony because he's a fantastic route runner. He wins in multiple ways in the receiving game, but he's just not that inline blocker that Brock Bowers is.
Mm-hmm.
Evan, to add on to what you were talking about there, yeah, you were talking about the missed tackles forced. Huge, absolutely huge. These stats are coming from PFF, but yeah, the 33 missed tackles forced is an absolutely insane number from the tight end position. 52.2% of his routes ran from the slot over the course of his career. That's exactly what you want to see. A guy that's not even though he is fantastic as a blocker, you want to see him being used in more than one way, and specifically as a receiver. So I love seeing him getting out into the slot, making some plays. You guys already touched on it, but it's really the elite acceleration, I think, is the key. What makes him stand out. I don't think that even though he has the missed tackles forced number there, in the tape, I wasn't necessarily seeing him make a ton of guys miss consistently. I think that he has that ability and will be able to show that when he has some open space. But I think really it's more of his acceleration that keeps guys guessing and taking terrible angles. Is this big boy, even though he's wearing 19, like he's the tight end. You're not expecting this guy to have the takeoff that he does, but you see it like even on those screens where it is just no forward momentum. He takes off. It is incredible seeing that at the tight end position, and I think is going to create a lot of huge plays for him in the NFL. Other than that, though, just incredible concentration. He's got strong hands. He has great focus. There is tons of plays. Even if you just you don't break down the film, but you just watch the highlight tape, you're gonna see some of these plays where the ball's tipped. He has no business making this catch, and he comes down with it and rips off a huge run afterwards. So spectacular catch. I said if this was Madden, his spectacular catch rating would be at least 95. Sideline catches, contested catches, strong hands, all huge attributes. This is pure speculation right here, but I think he's got to have one of those weird situations where your arms are much longer than your height. That big catch radius. There's some balls that are thrown off target, and he just looks like he's got these like pterodactyl arms that just span out and like, nope, that ball's mine. I'm coming down with it. So that I said he doesn't break a lot of tackles, but he does finish his run strong. You guys touched on that. And then the last thing I'll say is I think he's got pretty good vision as well. In the tape, you'll see some tight end sweeps, some plays where they're bringing them in motion, give them a little handoff. And on those plays, even though they're not very frequent, I feel like he did a great job of reading his blocks, not necessarily having to, come into contact where a lot of average players would create the point of contact, but rather, again, setting up those blocks, creating a little bit of a hole for himself, and getting a couple extra yards before he even sees a defender. So all those things, positives. Let's get to the tough part here, though. Lee, I'll kick it back to you. What do you got for the negatives?
So disclaimer, I mean, again, with a guy with his production profile, as highly rated as he is, we're really nitpicking because it's tough to find a lot of negatives there. The things that stood out to me would be the release a little bit, especially when he's playing inline. As Evan pointed out, how much he played from the slot. If he's going to be an inline tight end in the NFL, I think he's going to have to, improve his some release moves. I could see him getting caught up at the line of scrimmage. You're going to be going against more physical players on a every down basis. He's good, but not great there, and that kind of plays back to the size a little bit. I also worry a little bit about him getting open against high-level NFL safeties, especially when they're playing man against him. Kind of feels like early on he's going to be a zone buster. The guy can find the holes in the zone very easily. Getting open one-on-one with a premier safety, that may take a little time, but again, with his speed, maybe a little bit more refined route running, that will come. The other thing I would point out would be, again, and we mentioned it in the positive as well, but just with his size, how effective will he be as an inline blocker? Because, again, you're playing against elite outside linebackers and defensive ends in that position. I think that will come, but, again, we kind of have to see how he progresses. There's not a ton of negative, but those two things would kind of be what stood out the most to me. And I could see him adding on a little bit of muscle without losing any speed. But yeah, I think, again, we're nitpicking a bit, and, beating man coverage is not easy in the NFL against elite secondary members. but he has all the tools to do it. It's just there's so much zone in college, and he's so good against the zone. I think early on, I think also kind of continuing to play in the slot a bit more. And the NFL has shifted that direction where they do, play tight ends in the slot. We saw it a lot with Dalton Kincaid this past year. So I think early on, slot tight end, busting up the zone. Within a couple of years, I could see him being a bit more complete as far as that goes.
Yeah, fully agree there. Evan, what you got for the negatives?
Yeah, so negatives are kind of going to be like along the same lines of his frame and his size. He's definitely smaller than most, but this is like the trend that we're seeing now. So nothing to be scared from. And it's another thing not to be scared from is this injury prone label that he's kind of had slapped on him already. I don't see that being an issue. He's a really tough competitor too. I see him playing through a lot of injury, things like that. So I don't think that this is going to be something we have to worry about. It's not like he's had like a bad hamstring injury where he's got something recurring too. But I think my biggest takeaway, I really couldn't take much away because, like you said, he's pretty stellar athlete, but he struggled a little bit in press coverage. He was playing a lot of snaps out of the slot, and I would have liked to see him, get a little bit better off of that. I think that's what you're saying along terms with like the release there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, struggled a bit there and would have liked to see a little bit more improvement there. But yeah, other than that, it was really hard to find negatives on him.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys hit on most of it. I said that he's not an impeccable run blocker. And side note, right next to it, nitpicking. Because there's just occasions where he's in open space and has the block there, and he doesn't complete the block, doesn't maintain it throughout while the runner gets through. Again, it's nitpicking. I think more often than not, he does a good job with it, but it's not consistent. And then the other thing that I had is there's not elite at agility. He's agile for a tight end prospect, but he doesn't have the shake and bake to really make guys miss. He's going to, make them uh, take them off balance, choose a shoulder, run through the shoulder. But there's not too many times where he's just going to straight up juke or spin move somebody here. He's more so of pick a direction and let's get through it. And I appreciate that in a tight end. Let's not do something that you're not, brought on the team to do. You're not here to be a Tyreek Hill, like let's choose a shoulder and gain those extra yards. I do appreciate that. However, it's not like he has some type of like elite shake and bake here. So again, we're nitpicking. I think this is really the last player that we have to say this about. We haven't talked about Malik Neighbors yet. That I don't think there's going to be that many negatives, but in comparison to the players we've talked about so far, maybe aside of Blake Corum, I don't think there's too many negatives to bring up about these players we have talked about. But we'll start getting more into the nitty gritty as we move on. Might end up adding, more than just one rookie breakdown per episode. So make sure you're staying tuned. We're going to be breaking down a lot of players, especially with the the 2023 to 24 NFL season coming to a close. This is all we got, guys. we need to talk rookies, or else I will just decease.
Yeah.
I will stop being. So
Well, free agency's coming up too. So we got that segment
I
coming up as well.
man. That's my favorite day of the year for the NFL. I know it's probably like obviously there's all the hype of the regular season. The draft is incredible. I love analyzing contracts that are given to these guys, where one guy lands, what does that mean for the next team up? All these teams that are really hoping to make a quick turnaround, Commanders included. Chargers included, even though they have way less cap space. We're all trying. We're just hoping for the best, and that is the time for it. Free agent season. What vets can you bring in to get the job done next season? All right, so this is one of the more fun parts of these rookie breakdowns. Ideal landing spot. If you guys could pick any team in the NFL, who is Brock Bowers going to have the most production? Lee, I'll start off with you.
So I'm going to go again. It's very, very unlikely, but I think it's kind of the easy answer, the obvious answer. Travis Kelce retires.
Yep.
Kansas City drafts him as a replacement. I mean,
Yep.
they run their offense through the tight end already. So I don't know that you could find any better situation than that.
That's my number one as well.
Yep. Yeah, that wasn't my number one. I picked Chargers for obvious reasons. I hate Kansas City.
Very ideal for you.
Very ideal, and happens to be, spoiler alert, happens to be my next one as well, because very realistic to have Chargers having a top 5 pick. But we need another Antonio Gates, and I think he's the most likely guy to be that.
Let's just combine the two. Evan, kick it off with the realistic landing spot reasons. I also have the Chargers listed as my number one.
Yeah, Chargers number one. I mean, he's going to be a top 10 draft pick, so it's going to be one of these teams in the top 10, realistically, in my opinion. So the Chargers have the biggest need for it. They really don't have many other people in the room for that, and not any, like a lot of other teams that are in the top 10 have much worse needs elsewhere. So the Chargers really are. It makes the most sense there, and I would love it the most. So personally,
Yeah. Donald Parham Jr., free agent. Gerald Everett, free agent. They need that guy at tight end. He can both. On top of it, I think this is the biggest reason personally why I think that they actually will go with Brock Bowers. They brought in Jim Harbaugh. They have Greg Roman as their offensive coordinator. Both are extremely run heavy play callers. So no matter who's calling the plays there, they are going to be run heavy, I think. And what do you want to bring in? Malik Neighbors, who is incredible on his own right, but he is not going to add much to the run blocking game. Or Brock Bowers, a generational tight end talent that will still add a ton to your passing game, but then also add that sixth offensive lineman in the run blocking game. So those were the two biggest things for me. And then on top of it, I think that Mike Williams, to me, is an obvious cap space cut. He's got I'll fact check it really quick. I know that his cap hit is $20 million. Let's see what his dead cap is. All right. So heading into 2024. Okay, so it was a cap savings of $20 million. He has a $32.4 million cap hit in 2024 and a 12.4 dead cap. That is vast. There's no way they go into the season wanting to spend $32.4 million on Mike Williams. So I think he's gone. I think they need receivers in this game. I think he'll be leaned on if he goes to the Chargers. But Lee, let's kick it over to you. You already gave us your ideal, but what's your realistic?
So I mean, I could definitely see the Chargers. I feel like there's so many needs there to spend that draft capital on typically a lower value position. I could definitely see them going offensive, defensive line, and getting the top prospect at either one of those. So I mean, I think he's going to Atlanta to take the Jonnu Smith role.
Oh,
just kidding.
I was gonna say. Oh,
yeah. I mean, we know how they like their skill positions in the top 10. No, I think I really have two. I think it's either 9 to the Bears or 10 to the Jets. Either way,
Jets were actually a questionable one for me too. I almost put the Jets too. So
I have the Jets as my third. That's funny. We all got them there.
They don't have a second receiving option behind Garrett Wilson right now.
Yep.
They're trying to win now. That gives you a great attention taker, to have Garrett Wilson on one side. He's typically going to require some safety help. So, eating up the zone, getting a lot of open space for him to play in. And again, I think the Bears, either way they go with the quarterback, they need playmakers as well. But I think I kind of lean more towards the Jets at 10 is where I think he'll end up.
Absolutely, yeah. Just a couple of notes I had for the Jets here. Tyler Conklin is the only tight end that is listed under contract, and I think he's going to be a cap cut. He's got a $9 million cap hit. If they wait until after June 1st, it's only a $2.3 million dead cap. That's $6.7 million in cap savings, and he wasn't adding that much to the team. I know what a lot of y'all are thinking out there. What about Zach Kuntz? He was just drafted last year. They cut him on August 29th and then re-signed him to the practice squad 1 day later. So he's going into this offseason as an unrestricted free agent. Likely that'll be brought back for a very minimal deal. However, he's an unrestricted free agent. There's no guarantee that he's going to be back on the team. He doesn't have the contract that he signed when he was a rookie. So I think that does go a long ways. And it bare minimum of talking about what they think of him. This was the off season, so I mean, there probably wasn't a lot of time in between the time they cut him and the time he was available to be picked up from other teams, but they did not find him valuable enough to keep on that very cheap rookie deal that they signed him to, and instead brought him back in on a 1 year deal. I do think that the Jets would be a great landing spot. Um, Really quick, just because we combine the two, I'm just going to touch on the other teams I had listed for the ideal landing spot. Um, Not likely to happen, but I have the Dallas Cowboys, and then I do have the Chargers still listed as my third. Chargers still third in ideal and number one in realistic. That's a great combo. And then for Dallas, it's like they got Jake Ferguson there. He's signed to a pretty cheap deal. Jake Ferguson, even though he thrived in this system last year, is just a guy. He's not anything special, really. Doesn't have any elite traits that I would point towards. I think he's done well in this system. I do think this seems to be like Dallas brings in these guys that um, have success eventually in their career, typically not in their rookie season. I don't know if it's a philosophy standpoint for them or whatnot, but I think Brock Bowers is the one prospect that can cut through that. I don't think that he would take much time to at least be ahead of Jake Ferguson on the depth chart, and then not many games into the 2024 season where we see him with elite snap percentage in comparison and really taking over as a dominant tight end. And then, like I said earlier, the tight end role there in Dallas is what you want on your fantasy squad. Jake Ferguson's just a guy, and he had a incredible season last year. You picked him up in Dynasty. I had him off the waiver wire. Then I drafted Luke Schoonmaker, and like an idiot, I dropped Jake Ferguson, and now I'm paying the piper. I do have George Kittle, but whatever.
Yeah.
I picked up Jake Ferguson off the waiver wire after somebody had dropped him in mine, and then I flipped him for what ended up being 202 because I'm pretty set at tight end anyway. So.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah,
incredible to get.
yeah.
Is it the upcoming 202? Do you have any specific targets in mind with that 202? Tough to say. It's tough
Depending
to
on the
say. There's always a
situation,
lot of moving.
I'm looking running back, so I need some good draft capital for Trey Benson or my guy Braylon Allen.
We'll talk about it more as the offseason progresses. I think Trey Benson's going to jump up into the first round personally, but that's my number one RB. So we'll talk about that more at another time. So did anybody else have a realistic landing spot or an ideal landing spot to add for Brock Bowers?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I just
got
put
one other ideal, and this will be a recurring theme with pretty much any offensive player. Not realistic, but ideal. You put him in that Miami offense with the two outside weapons, with the speed he has. I know that they haven't thrown to the tight end, but they had Durham Smythe. Mike McDonald came from the Shanahan tree. We see how San Francisco utilizes George Kittle. We'll get into that with our player comps in a minute. But, there'd be a lot of open space to run in that Miami.
You just love the idea of shaking up that Miami offense a little bit. Last time you want to change up Caleb Williams, throw him in there over Tua. Now you want to throw him in here. But I can see him being successful over there too. I think it really helps Tua more than it would help him. But
yeah, so I looked at the Dolphins and I thought, idealistically they throw the ball a ton. They target the tight end position at the lowest clip in the league by a long shot. 9.5% of their targets went to the tight end. That was the lowest by 3.5 percentage points I'm going to take a quick look at
Well, is
2000.
that because game script, or is it because the players that they have on the team?
Durham
So
Smythe.
Yeah.
Durham Smythe is terrible. Last year,
That's what I mean.
I think we all agree that Mike Gesicki isn't by any means an elite tight end. I would say in terms of just his receiving skill, probably middle of the pack. Top 20 tight end in the league. Just in terms of pure receiving, no blocking. Even in 2022, when they had Mike Gesicki on the team, healthy full year, also tied for the lowest percentage of targets to their tight end position at 13.3. Both years under Mike McDaniels. Maybe they change. I think that Mike McDaniels is a really Mike McDaniel, no S. I gotta correct myself on that. But I don't think that he is a stagnant coach. I think he would change with the skill positions improving on his team at tight end. But I do think that overall he likes passing to the wide receivers. He likes targeting players downfield, incorporating some movement pre-snap and then some play action. All of that creates some big plays that they frequently take advantage of. So maybe Brock Bowers could build into that. But like you said, overall, it is unrealistic that he ends up landing there. The one other realistic landing spot, I'll make this quick so we can move on. But I also have so Jets were at the 10th overall pick, Chargers were at the 5th. I have Denver Broncos with the 12th overall pick as a realistic landing spot. This is if Brock Bowers falls just a touch. But last offseason, Sean Payton multiple times mentioned the Joker role in his offense. So he talked about that. That's a guy that can create mismatches. He talked about Greg Dulcich being that guy. Greg Dulcich, Greg Dulcich missed most of the season this year. He had 2 games, both under 33% snap percentage. Uh, Even if he comes back and is completely full strength, ready to go, I think that they are ready to take the next evolution in this team. I think with trading the first pick that they had for Sean Payton last year, I think they are giving him the reins. And if it's up to him, this is the type of player that can really create a problem in his offense. Um, Not to give away too many spoilers here, but on the low end of things in terms of the production comp that I have here, I have 2 players named. One of them is Jimmy Graham. I do think that if he went to the Broncos, they could use him as this is not a play style comparison, but more a production comparison. I think Sean Payton will get creative in the end zone, use Brock Bowers in a very interesting way that will create a lot of touchdowns. And then on top of it, you don't have a ton of great wide receiver talent there. Judy and Sutton are both signed through this next year, but you guys have already heard all the rumors. They wanted to get rid of him last year. So if they get rid of him, I don't really see a world where Brock, if they get rid of one of Cortland Sutton or Jerry Judy, I don't see a world where they draft Brock Bowers and he's not a top 6 tight end personally. So that'd be kind of both slightly idealistic, but also realistic. Let's move on to our next portion, though.
Real quick,
Player style
that's-
comp.
Real quick,
Sorry,
I
go
think
ahead.
the world where he wouldn't be a top 6 tight end in Denver would be one where Jared Stidham was throwing him the ball, or
Oh my God.
some other garbage quarterback.
Let's all pray that this is not the case.
Right.
If Jared Stidham's the quarterback of the Denver Broncos, they have the 101 locked up. I don't care what their defense looks like. There is no world where Jared Stidham brings them outside of the top 3 picks. But let's move on to the player style comps. I'm gonna switch it up. Evan, I'm gonna hit you first. What do you got for a player style comp?
Yeah, my player style comp pretty similar to his gameplay and how he's played and how he handles the ball when he's got the ball in his hands too. George Kittle. I think George Kittle is he's just a beast, and I see Brock Bowers being just as beastly, and could even produce more than George Kittle in the long term. But we'll see, to be determined on that. But I think that the play style, everything, I love it. George Kittle.
Lee, do you have the same thing?
I did, but I have an alternative because I figured one of you guys were going to say George Kittle.
I really quickly, I'll just touch on it because George Kittle's the only guy I had listed. I went through the last 15 years of tight ends trying to look for a more like apt comparison. Because like after I do all of my evaluation on the rookie, I then look at, let's see what we got other industry guys talking about these comparisons. It's just George Kittle, like the guy is almost a clone of him. I would say that Bowers has slight more acceleration and that Kittle is more consistent of a blocker. Outside of that, they are pretty damn similar. But Lee, who's your alternative? I'm
Well,
curious.
they're different in the draft pick. He's not going to be drafted 146.
That is a fact.
So yeah, like I said, I concur. George Kittle, there's a lot of similarities, but I went with another San Francisco drafted tight end from a little bit longer ago, Vernon Davis.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No,
I didn't mean to cut you off.
I always appreciate the applause. The speed is the biggest thing with Vernon. They're similar size as well. It took Vernon a little while to really come into his own, but he was a heck of a tight end when he really got the opportunity, and he stuck around. I mean, he had a few good years in Washington. A lot of tight ends are late bloomers, but I think the speed, the size, not being a great inline blocker, I think there's a lot of similarities there.
Dude, so yeah, I had the same thing written down. It's just the fact that Vernon Davis had like such an elite combine. I think that Brock Bowers is incredibly fast, very agile, not very agile, but has great acceleration. However, Vernon Davis had probably the most impressive combine in tight end history.
Fastest tight end in combine.
4.38 40-yard dash. 42 which by the way is 99th percentile. Vertical jump 42 inches, 98th percentile. Broad jump 128 inches, 96th percentile. 20-yard shuttle, if you aren't familiar, that is basically an acceleration test. 4.17 seconds, 89th percentile. And even the bench press, bro put up 33 reps, 98th percentile at the tight end position. That's literally the only reason why I didn't have Vernon Davis as the player style comp. He was just insane. If you guys ever played Madden on, GameCube, PS2 back in the day, Vernon Davis is the first tight end off the board, hands down. You got your field stretcher in between the seams. Just high. I hold him very high in just terms of a physical comp. But I did actually have him listed as my low-end production comp. That was the other guy next to Jimmy Graham. Very different play styles, but I could see, depending on where he lands, either him having that creative red zone role or that, like, let's use you as a field stretcher role. Both would be on the low end if you're talking Jimmy Graham or Vernon Davis. But, Evan, I digress. I'm going to kick it over to you for your production comps.
My production comp is going to be a guy, and this is on his year 2 value, not his year 1 value. So this might be giving it away right away. But Trey McBride, I think that he's going to produce like Trey McBride did in year 2, year 1, and I expect that to be pretty standard going forward too. I expect him to really tear up the league.
Yeah, I like that. There's just a little bit. There's not enough in his career for me to comp him to that, but I do get what you're saying. Heavily targeted, great route runner. And Trey McBride, when I was looking up Brock Bowers' rookie stats, one of the only guys to consistently beat him in metrics. So, different stages of their career, but I don't mind that comp at all. Lee, who do you got for a production comp?
So high end, and this kind of goes back to Evan's ideal spot. And I mean, the bar is really high, but Antonio Gates, let's see him come out and produce like a top 5 tight end of all time. I think if he goes to the Chargers, I almost said San Diego, He goes to Los Angeles, especially with the age of the other receiving core, and he's paired with a Justin Herbert for the next 10 years, kind of like Gates got paired with Phillip Rivers. I could certainly see that potential there. I think on the low end, and again, I'm not wishing on him, but I could see an Evan Ingram type of, especially early on before he became more of a possession tight end. He was a big play guy. He had a lot of yards. Didn't get a lot of red zone targets, early on, but I think he had the most yards for a rookie tight end ever. So
Yep.
I mean, that's still a pretty high bar if that's the low side.
Yeah, I also had Evan Ingram listed for me as well, but I there was just like the great rookie production, and then after that it fell off for a 4 year span. After that he did not finish in the top 12 tight ends in full PPR rankings. And I
That's a
just
lot of
couldn't see a
injury.
world where that happens. So that is why I went Vernon Davis on my low end. And then I wrote down, I said, it feels lazy, but after looking at players for a long time, the only one that makes sense is still George Kittle. I think that George Kittle is more towards the upper portion of what he can do here, the potential. George Kittle didn't have a great rookie season. It takes tight ends a little bit to adapt. But after that, in his sophomore NFL season, 1,377 yards. That was a tight end record for, I think it was about 30 minutes before the Chiefs game started. And then Kelsey broke that record immediately that same year. Um, so other than that, though, like he George Kittle has some streaks, some ups and downs. He's missed some time due to injury, but overall, when he plays, he's productive. I think Brock Bowers could follow that route really quickly. We running out of time on covering Brock Bowers, but just quick hit me with either a tight end dynasty superflex trade value guy that you would target if you are trying to get rid of Brock Bowers, for whatever reason, or a guy that you'd be trading away to acquire Brock Bowers.
Oof. Yeah, this is a tough one here. I mean, I do believe his we can kind of do this lump sum the next two here. I think that his value, which is being currently mocked at the 106, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's pretty accurate. So it's like, what would you trade for the 106 this year's draft? Oof, and it would be a lot. You're asking for a lot. From a running back perspective, if you're loaded on running back, I would be comfortable trading away like Ramondre Stevenson, Kenneth Walker, any of those guys. Maybe not KW, but yeah, it's one of those guys that for kind of comp comparison. At tight end, I don't see how I would ask for Kincaid or McBride or one of those guys, but I just don't even think that would be enough to get Brock at this point because he's just younger. But who knows? Maybe.
I would not trade Trey McBride or Sam Laporta for him. I would keep those two guys. Kincaid's a guy I would strongly consider. I mean, I feel like that's really it's situation dependent, really. There, Mark Andrews is an interesting name to think about.
That's too high for me personally.
Yeah, that would be too high, I think.
I'm worried.
He's still pretty young too.
He's 29.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's a very consistent producer, but the injury, he has had injuries a couple of times. I think if I were in a rebuild, I would be all right trading Mark Andrews and maybe try to get a little something extra with that.
Yeah.
But any other tight end, you're going to have to add something with them. And again, you got to hope they produce early because I am a little bit snake bitten from the early tight end picks. And if you're win now, I don't think you want to pay that price on the chance that he does take a year to really develop an NFL.
I do get that. I definitely get that. It's hard to find any tight end to do a straight up trade with here. What I put was Kyle Pitts plus a late second, early third, just based on his NFL production. That could change very quickly under new coaching. But I put Kyle Pitts late third. Outside of tight end, I put Jared Goff, Isaiah Pacheco, Mike Evans. All of those guys I'd be happy to get rid of in order to acquire Brock Bowers. Um, I think that with the season Mike Evans is coming off of, you can make an argument for at least a mid to late first. Um, that's going to be for a team that's competing right now, though. Isaiah Pacheco, he's young. He's coming off a great season. He's a seventh round pick. There's not a lot of stability there. So as much as I love watching him and just angry run through anyone's face, even though he's not a big boy, I'm gonna take Brock Bowers over Pacheco. And then Jared Goff, again, same type of argument, coming off of a very solid season. I don't know if the longevity is there, even though he's sub 30 going into next year. I just don't see the longevity there. So I'm trying to get rid of those types of players for Brock Bowers. Again, this is super flex trade value. So if it's a single quarterback league, Jared Goff obviously is not going to have that value. But let's
I don't
move
think
on.
I'd move Jared
Yeah,
Goff.
let's hit some wide receiver questions here. What do you think? Would you trade Brock Bowers for Christian Watson?
Yes,
Yes.
immediately.
DK
Hands down.
Metcalf.
No.
Ooh, Jahan Dotson.
Yes.
No. Well, yes, I am trading for Brock Bowers.
Okay. So GK is where we draw the line. I see.
DK for sure. Yeah, if we're just talking about overall,
What about Jalen Waddle?
No.
I agree.
Wouldn't
No,
give up
he's
Waddle
too
for
much
that.
of a big playmaker. I think he had a down year, but I don't think overall he is, that low on the totem pole. All right, I'm pulling up some guys too because I kind of wanted
Nico
to
Collins.
throw these questions. Oh, that's a great one. Because Boyo's young. He's on in a great situation. Does he actually get extended? That's the thing. What kind of money is he going to be demanding after? So I could be wrong, but I believe this was his third year this year. So he's got to have another year. He's not a first round pick, so he won't have the extension option. So really, he's got this year to prove that he's that dude and deserves the contract or not. And I think that he's going to demand. He personally is going to be asking for the contract anyways.
Who's
So I think that's a perfect
who's that? Was that Nico? Nico Collins?
Nico Collins, yeah.
Nah, I'd take Nico over him.
You're a Nico owner. I knew you'd say no.
Yeah, I don't need talks about extension. I'm good.
Just to contrast, I'll say yes. They have Tank Dell. Tank Dell started eating into that work. I think there's a possibility that they at least bring in a stronger option than Robert Woods and or Noah Brown. If they do it this year, then Nico obviously takes a little bit of a dip. If they do it next year while he's on his on his final year of his contract, they might just let Nico walk, depending on how much he's asking for. So I'll just take the contrarian position there. I'm curious where you stand, though.
I think I would. Obviously, I've got to be pretty strong at wide receiver, in that scenario. But I think I would. One more. And
Hold on, really quick before we move on. What if Brock Bowers somehow gets drafted to the Texans? Who are you taking, Nico or Brock Bowers?
In that instance, I'd be more likely to take Brock, but still Nico.
Right.
Yeah, I think I would definitely take Brock in that scenario.
He'll be there at least for probably 5 years, eating into Nico's work. So I agree with the analysis there. Lee, I didn't mean to cut you off, though. What you have there?
JSN.
Oh, see, now I'm biased because I took JSN at the 104
He's too young. JSN's too young. I'd have to it's just positional value at that point, and I think the positional value of wide receiver is more valuable than what Brock could be. So I'd keep.
That's one of the positions where it actually compares almost favorably to the tight end. We see some guys that make it into their early to mid 30s as still productive tight ends. So the only position where I would say, Well, I guess quarterback too, depending on your play style.
You typically only start one tight end though, so there's positional scarcity. And I don't know. It's just that you need more wide receivers, and I think that having the depth with JSN having
That's
him,
a
even
fair
as
point.
depth
That's a
thought,
fair
too.
point. It's just
To
Tyler
counter
Lockett's
the-
under contract for at least this next year, and DK Metcalf is as well. I think DK's into 2025. So it really is hard to see where JSN shines through unless Tyler Lockett takes a huge step down. And even if he takes a huge step down, he's still gonna. I doubt any of us would project Tyler Lockett to get less than like 700 receiving yards next year.
I'll
Yeah,
project him for less.
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 All right, Lee. Me and you are always on the same
Yeah,
page.
we're opposites there.
We
I
got
think
right
he's
this
done.
one
I think
down.
he went
I'm
over
gonna
the
take
age of
Tyler
50
Lockett
next
for
year.
plus 600 receiving yards. You
Oh,
got
you
him
said
under.
6 or 7. Let's split the difference. 650.
I agree with that. That's fair enough. Tyler Lockett, 650 plus. All right, we got it down. Let's move on to our next segment. I know we're skipping over the rookie, uh, Superflex rookie draft positioning, but we already kind of talked about it. Roughly 106. So the next segment: who is one player that underperformed with their team this year, that's heading into free agency, that you think just needs a little bit of a change of scenery to get the job done? Let's keep it brief.
So I'll go T. Higgins. We've talked a lot about T on the show.
Mhm.
I
Have we?
think even if he stays in Cincinnati, he's bound for a bounce back year. But if he can go somewhere where he's the number one guy, if he goes to Buffalo and they move on from Stephon Diggs, or he goes to Kansas City, he is an increased target share. He is too good a receiver. He's got to stay healthy. We know, Evan, he's got to stay healthy. But he's too good a receiver, man. I see a big bounce back year for him, really wherever he ends up. But in an ideal scenario, he's going to get a huge bag. I know a lot of people are projecting him to stay in Cincy. I don't see it. I think he's going to go to a different team who's going to pay him like the number one, and I don't see them being able to.
All
Okay.
right.
Fair. I think that's
Evan?
a pretty. A lot of people are probably going to figure out, like, he's the biggest question mark guy. Biggest question mark guy.
Yeah.
Were you going to pass it off to me then?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm going with somebody that I own and kind of curious what's going to happen here too. Calvin Ridley finished at wide receiver 18 PPR formats. Five game spread right here. He had 27, 22, 19, 19, 19. Those were his top 5 weeks. He also had 6 games under 6 points. So it's purely game script. Like sometimes he was the number one guy, and sometimes Christian Kirk was the number one guy, and that made things incredibly frustrating. I think he's an elite separator, and if he gets scripted into the game more consistently, I could see him being a wide receiver 1 next year, depending on if he lands on the right team.
Yeah, I could see that, especially after a year and a half off. Hard to get right back into the swing of things.
He
guy
did
that
that.
I have-
And then he got phased out, and then he went back in, and then he got phased out. It was like a flip flop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Christian Kirk goes down. He's more needed, more targets. It'll be very landing spot dependent where I value his dynasty value here. The guy I have listed, I said the obvious one, Saquon Barkley. I didn't list any notes because it feels way too obvious to talk about. You guys know if Saquon lands in a good spot, he'll produce. Marquise Brown is the player I have listed. In 2019 with the Ravens were 29th in pass attempts per game. In 2020, they were 32nd. In case y'all don't know, that is last in pass attempts per game. In those 2 seasons, he finished as the wide receiver 46 and 36. Next year, 2021, pass attempts are 9th in the league. He goes up to wide receiver 22. I'm not asking why Marquise Brown to be a wide receiver 1. I just want him to be a even mid to late wide receiver 2 to get the job done and really see a boost in his production. I think that can happen if he lands in the right spot. When that happened in 2021, when the Ravens threw the 9th most passing attempts per game, he was a wide receiver 22. literally all I'm asking for him. So that's the guy that I have listed here. Not crazy high expectations, but just the guy that needs a less run heavy team to be a part of. So let's move on. Final segment, boys. We got the Super Bowl coming up. What do you
Yeah.
say? Who do you got as the winners? We'll move on to more segments here, but who do you got as the winner straight up? Lee, we'll start with you.
Chiefs. Chiefs win.
Chiefs, easy enough. Evan, who you got?
I got the Niners.
I got the Niners as well. So we got 2 Niners, 2 Chiefs. I do think it comes
No,
down
we probably
to
got 3 Niners. We probably got Mason's probably
is
going Niners.
1000% fact. I could not see a world where Mason chooses otherwise. But we got so what I had it boiling down to is just like where do they win, where do they lose in terms of this specific matchup. Obviously, quarterback matchup goes to KC. Obviously, running back matchup goes to San Francisco. I would say overall, obviously, wide receiver matchup goes to San Francisco. Tight end, slight edge to Kansas City. I think George Kittle is the more complete tight end, and he's far younger than Kelsey. However, Kelsey's just that dude. He gets it done. He's going to find a way. Andy Reid, Mahomes, and Kelsey is a lethal combination. So they will find a way to produce. However, this was the most interesting portion, I thought, to judge. Offensive line. Lee, who do you give the edge to in offensive line between these two teams?
Kansas City.
Dooney's not playing.
So you go Kansas City?
It's Trent Williams and everybody else for San Francisco, and he might be the best left tackle of all time, but there's a lot of holes otherwise.
Yeah, I have Kansas City with a slight edge, and then more specifically to each portion, Kansas City's a fantastic pass blocking team. I don't have it in front of me, but I believe they were top 3 in pass blocking. San Francisco was the #1 run blocking team in the league. Very difficult to do. I think if they lean on that, then they can have some success. However, both defenses are stout when they're playing at the top of their game. I would give the slight edge to Kansas City as well. Evan, what do you got?
I mean, so Joe Thuney, however his name pronounced, he's what?
Keep on going. Keep on going.
Oh yeah, he's really he's solid. So I mean, I can't like.
He's not out officially.
He's gonna. It's very long shot. Very long.
He didn't play in the AFC Championship game, and the O line looked pretty good in that.
Also. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I mean, he's an elite guard, but
yeah, that's a big difference maker for me. So I'd say San Francisco for sure has the offensive line edge, but I don't think that's what you asked. What were you asking me?
Yeah, just offensive line edge. You're leaning towards San Fran, you say?
Yeah, San Fran.
Okay. So then D-line, I think it's consensus San Francisco for sure. Love Chris Jones, but there's just one guy. George Karlaftis coming into his own. Not enough there to override what San Francisco has. Linebacker comparison, I went San Francisco. You guys have something different?
Yeah, Fred.
Linebacker San Fran. And then D-backs, easily KC for me this year. San Fran's just been underperforming. Overall, that gives San Fran the, and it obviously doesn't just boil down to matchup positions or position matchups, but I do think that San Francisco has the more complete team. I think they have more ways to get it done. But at the end of the day, it kind of just feels like it boils down to Patrick Mahomes versus Brock Purdy. And I feel like that's why there's still a slight lean towards the betting market for Kansas City to at least cover the spread. Spread is, I should have mentioned this at the top. San Francisco is favored by 2. The over-under is 47.5 points. Really quickly, for the people that are listening on the radio podcast, I'm going to end it here. We talked a little bit about it. I'll say really quickly for the radio podcast, who do we got as your MVP of the Super Bowl?
This one I love at plus 3,500. Give me Isaiah Pacheco.
Whoa.
We're down a couple of dollars. The run defense for San Francisco has been really bad, and that will be worth the while if it pays out.
I like that as an underdog pick. Evan, who do you have as an MVP?
I kind of, it's got to be Christian McCaffrey. It's got to be CMC. I see him just going off, and I know it's not going to be an easy matchup for him too, but it's good. It's Christian McCaffrey.
I like that. I like that. I went with Debo Samuel. I think that they're going to. I don't feel like he has been shining as that, like, let's call him a Swiss pocket knife. He can do it all. And I don't think that they have been showing enough of his ability to do it all. And I think that it's kind of in with the vision of doing it now in the game that matters most. So I say they use Debo Samuel in multiple different roles. He gets it done in the receiving role. He gets it done on the ground. He ends up with 2 touchdowns. And we're gonna talk about some more prop bets if you guys stick around. I know this probably cuts it off for the radio podcast here, but we're gonna keep it rolling here for a little bit longer. Talk about this Super Bowl predictions that we got going on, some prop bets that we have going here. There's many of them, boys. I listed it out for us. I charted the goddamn thing. So let's talk. We got a little bit of free range space here. I don't think we're on air
Here,
anymore.
let's share it for these viewers watching on.
Yeah,
See
I
if we
like
can
that.
share.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right. I gotta remove that. All right. So Evan, keep it rolling right now. Of the guy right now, San Francisco is favored by 2 points. That is 102 or negative 102 if you take the over. I'm sorry. There's a -2 spread. If you take them with the money line, that is negative 122. If you take them with the -2 spread, that is 102. Would you take KC or San Francisco in this instance? Not much of a favorable odds if you go with KC. So it's basically straight up. I'd probably take the spread with.
I'd be money line on either.
Well, I mean, you said San Francisco,
Well, I mean,
so
like if I don't see the spread being like 2 point spreads. I hate 2 point spreads in betting, dude. It's the worst. But that's why I always go money line in those.
yeah, 2 point spreads are difficult. I don't see it. There is a chance it could come down to a 1 point spread. I would say that both offensive, Shanahan and Reed are aggressive. They believe in their offense. They know that they can take chances and more often succeed. However, this year it is pretty difficult. They both have really great defenses. It's not something we could say about Kansas City in the past. However, they've been holding up this year. I do think that both teams take chances on 4th downs and then also maybe take chances on 2 point conversions. I could see this coming down to the last drive where one of these teams that we've picked here are willing to risk the biscuit on that, 4th quarter 2 point conversion, try to go for it. Whether they succeed or fail, who knows? But I do think that this could come down to a 1 point game. And I think that's what Vegas is seeing here by taking the 2 point spread. They've also kept it consistent. I've been tracking this since it came out to about a week and a half ago. And it stayed consistent at 2 point San Fran spread.
I think it
So,
was 2.5 right when it opened, but it dropped to 2 pretty quick.
yeah. Yeah. So,
I
Lee,
think
with
it
that
dropped
2 point
before.
spread,
I think
does
it
that
dropped
make
to
any
1 or
difference?
something. I mean, if it were 2.5 and not 2, I might be a little bit more likely to take the spread, but I'm kind of with Evan. Anything under 3, and I'm going money line.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Completely agreed there. It's much easier to take. I mean, so kind of to your point there, I will take the spread in that instance when I
You're
see
taking the
that.
favorite, yeah.
If it's under a 3 point spread, I'm going to take the spread and bet that it's going to be at least more than a field goal win. Take the additional winnings there. That being said, we got the over under. Like I said, if y'all are here, we're gonna be in it for a little bit here, talking about the Super Bowl. Happy to stay with y'all, but we got the over under 47.5 points. That is a uh minus 112 and minus 108 if you go the over on that, or I'm sorry, the under. So do you guys think it'll be over or under 47.5 points?
Smashing the over.
Yeah, I want to see an over, but I think it's going to be an under.
I'm kind of on your side, Evan. I do think that both of the defenses are being slightly undervalued. I think that San Fran has not shown their potential, but I do think overall they are a better defense that has been shown during the past like 4 or 5 weeks here. So I am gonna go under as well. We move on to the passing stats, basically to the QBs. We got Patrick Mahomes. If you guys aren't watching on YouTube, make sure to check it out. We got all of them listed here. But Patrick Mahomes, 261 and a half passing yards, 1.5 passing touchdowns, 26 and a half rushing yards. Uh, I'll leave the odds to watching it on YouTube here, so make sure you check it out. But of those stats, which one do you think they will for sure, or Patty Mahomes will for sure hit the over or under on?
I think it's going to be the passing touchdowns,
Which side?
the over. I think he's going to get 2 passing touchdowns at least.
I think that's fair. If you assume the Chiefs get at least 3 touchdowns on the game, then you probably take in Mahomes getting at least 2 of those 3.
Interested to see what Lee thinks over here with Pacheco going MVP.
I think I would
True.
go over it. If I had to pick one, I think it would be the passing yards because of the San Francisco vulnerability. I mean, I don't know that the passing touchdowns is a bad bet, but I think Pacheco is going to be the guy cashing in. I don't hate the rushing yards either. He's definitely scrambled more in the playoffs.
Yeah, that was the second one that I was going towards, but yeah.
Yeah. I am personally going passing yards here. The San Francisco 49ers have not been elite in one area of their defense, and that is specifically passing yards. Over the last few games here, the last 3 games, uh, they are 200. Oh, that's actually better than I thought. These are regular season games, but regular season 226 passing yards allowed. That is actually a tiny bit better than I thought that they would be. I do think that with just Patty Mahomes being the man he is going to take this offense to the next level. They've been performing at a much higher level in the postseason. But I do think that Mahomes will hit over 262 passing yards here.
Just want to point some out there, Dan. And again, it's last year's game has no impact on this one, but the 38-35 shootout, an incredible Super Bowl game. Mahomes only had 180 yards passing, which kind of surprised me when I went back and looked at that.
That is surprising.
He
That
had
is
44
surprising.
yards rushing.
The Eagles had a much very different secondary than they had this year. They really underperformed this year. However, that 180 is way under his average. That's what I do a lot of this stuff on. Like I'm not a prop betting analyst. I don't try to promote myself as such. However, over the last 2 years that the as legal sports betting has been legal in New York, I've profited both years. Like I'm making like a good little buck in the DraftKings here. So I like to fancy myself as such, but I do think that is important, if especially since last year in the Super Bowl. The Chiefs really have kind of altered themselves as a more run heavy team.
Mm-hmm.
Their defense has improved, their offensive line has improved, and I think like it's pretty obvious when they played a couple years back against the Rams, they kind of were made a fool. They did not have a great offensive line. They saw Patrick Mahomes running behind the offensive line, trying to just create and extend plays more so than ever before. The next gen stats had him by far leading the NFL in that Super Bowl game against the Rams in
It was the
terms of
Bucks.
just yards covered while scrambling, just trying to escape the pass rush.
It was the Bucks,
I
not the Rams.
say it again.
It was the Buccaneers that gave him so much trouble and beat him up. The Rams was the
Thank you.
Bengals.
For whatever reason, in my head, it was just Aaron Donald causing a problem here. But you're absolutely correct. That was against the Bengals, and I stand corrected. But yeah, no, the Bucks still ate them up. Vita Vea and company getting after Patrick Mahomes, making him move from outside of the pocket, eating up that interior offensive line. You're absolutely right. So yeah, I overall though I do think that there is some point to be made about disrupting the pocket, making Mahomes move, and not having the wide receivers necessary outside of Travis Kelsey to make the play happen out like off script. So I hear what you're saying there. I do think that overall that is an argument, like you guys were saying, for Patrick Mahomes to hit the over on the rushing yards. Um, really quick, out of the props that we have here, what would you say is your favorite prop to hit in the Super Bowl?
I mean, sticking with my previous, give me Pacheco over 66 and a half. They gave up 182 yards rushing last week to the Lions or 2 weeks ago.
They're a stout run defense.
They had been, but
They
they looked,
had, they
they
had been
been.
until Pacheco hit them.
Well, no, 182 yards from the Lions is a pretty good number in a championship game. The Lions got away from it even a little bit, but
Yeah. So Pacheco over on the rushing yards. And then Evan, what do you like here?
Out of all of them, I like Kittle too.
Kittle on what?
You said out of all these props?
Right, but what
49,
specific
49.
Oh, the
prop bet?
receiving yards or touchdown, honestly.
49 and a half.
Yeah,
I
over.
think that's
I
a
think
solid
over. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're talking about the overs, I definitely would agree with that. I already talked about how I think Debo will end up being the MVP of this game. I do think that if I was to create a small parlay here, I'm going Debo Samuel over 58 and a half receiving yards and an anytime TD. I will take the combination of those two. If you go over on the receiving yards, that's uh, minus 120 plus the anytime TD is plus 130. I think that is a solid combination on top of whatever you want to mix with it. We got Christian McCaffrey here, anytime touchdown minus 215. If you mix that into the combo, you're going to see a nice little payout for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that is going to do it. We overextended our stay a little bit here talking about the Super Bowl, but we got to do it. It's the Super Bowl, baby. We got to talk about this. We're going to be back next week to talk a little recap. Make sure you stay tuned for more rookie breakdowns and Super Bowl recaps. We got you covered here at Stadium Rant. Take it easy, y'all.